real job is the Chancellor, isn't he? Because he'd be no good at waiting on tables. The Chancellor is joining us now. Chancellor, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Kay. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you. I want to talk about restaurants in just a second, and indeed why you weren't wearing a mask yesterday. We'll come to that. But first, let's start with the economy more generally. I'm going to keep my questions short because we've got a lot to get through. Do you have a sense of how well the economy is doing at the moment? It's been ages since we've had an official forecast, of course. What does your barometer tell you?
Well, of course, I know people are worried about employment, they're worried about losing their jobs, and that's why we acted yesterday with a plan for jobs worth up to £30 billion. Our plan is to support, create and protect as many jobs as we can, and although, as I said, hardship does lie ahead, we don't want people to be left without hope or opportunity, particularly younger people, which is why we launched the Kickstart scheme, but also those who work in the hospitality and tourism sectors, which is why we announced initiatives like the Eat Out to Help Out discount.
Yeah, and I want to go through all of that, but I'm just asking you more broadly to start with, Chancellor. What's your barometer telling you about the economy? What shape are we in?
Well, I think it's too early to tell, Kay, and most independent forecasters have acknowledged the fact that we're living in a time of unprecedented uncertainty when it comes to making economic predictions. You know, what we do know is that we've moved through the acute phase of the crisis where large swathes of the economy were closed. We're now fortunately able to safely reopen parts of our economy. That's the most important thing we can do to get things going. But we won't know the exact shape of that recovery for a little while. How will people respond to the new freedoms, to being able to go out and about again? You know, we have to rediscover behaviours that we've essentially unlearned over the past few months. But unless activity returns to normal, those jobs are at risk of going, which is why we acted in the way that we did.
Double-dip recession you must be worried about, though. That's what a lot of people are forecasting.
I am absolutely anxious about the state of the economy. We are, as I've said before, entering into a very significant recession. We know that that is happening. We acted at the beginning of this crisis to protect as many businesses and jobs as we could with initiatives like the furlough scheme and the unprecedented support we provided to business. We did that so that when we emerge through the other side of this crisis, we could bounce back as strongly as possible. Now that we're there, we want to try and make that recovery as strong as it can be, which is why having people out and about, back in restaurants, moving house, renovating homes, installing energy efficiency measures in their homes, hiring young people.
We'll get to that, Chancellor, if we may. We'll get to that. I just wanted a broad brush to start with. Yeah. OK, £30 billion rescue package. It does sound like a lot of money. How many jobs do you think you'll be able to save?
Well, I mean, each initiative's targeted at a different thing. If you take the job retention bonus, for example, that will apply to all 9 million people who have been furloughed. And what we want to do is provide a reward and an incentive to businesses up and down the country who are able to successfully bring those employees back to work. And if they're able to do that and continuously employ them through to January, they will receive a £1,000 payment for each of those 9 million people who have been furloughed. And that's probably one of the most significant interventions we can make at this time.
Do you really think that everybody who has been furloughed will go back to work?
No, I've been very clear that we were not going to be able to protect every single job. It would be wrong of me to pretend otherwise. And there are going to be difficult times ahead. And as you've acknowledged, there are forecasts of people predicting significant levels of unemployment. That weighs very heavily on me, which is why I wanted to act yesterday with a comprehensive plan to provide opportunity for people, protect as many existing jobs as we have, but also provide people with the opportunities and the skills they need to get new jobs, to look for new opportunities. And I'm hopeful what we did yesterday will allow people to do that.
To what extent do you accept that what you announced as far as jobs were concerned yesterday and this £1,000 bonus will be going to big businesses that would be taking people back anyway, whereas the smaller businesses, not the theatres particularly, but nightclubs, gig venues, that sort of thing, £1,000 is not going to really help them, is it?
No, well, this applies to everybody. All jobs are valuable to me and worth preserving if we can do that. And actually, if you look at the income distribution of those who are on furlough, which we spent a lot of time analysing, you know, I'm confident that £1,000 can make a significant contribution to the cost of employment over the period of time. For an average employee who has been furloughed, it will account to about 20% of those wage costs towards the end of that. So I think it will provide a significant reward and incentive to employers to bring those furloughed employees back.
But Chancellor, we're looking at gig venues, nightclubs, that sort of thing. They can't open until next year, but they have to bring people back as early as October, and they're only getting £1,000. They've got all of those salaries to pay, all the national insurance, etc. They're not going to do it, are they?
Well, I think if I heard you correctly talking also about the performing arts sector, which you're absolutely right. There is a different type of challenge there, and that's why we announced earlier in the week £1.5 billion package to support our vital cultural institutions. That's not just some of our large internationally acclaimed institutions in London, for example, but our local cultural institutions, theatres, for example, up and down the country. They're important parts of our local community, and we want to preserve that cultural heritage, and that support will enable those institutions to survive through this.
You're slightly missing my point there, Chancellor. I'm sure you're not doing it on purpose. Let's say specifically nightclubs then. Let's use that as an example. Why would nightclub owners bring people back now for £1,000 when actually they're going to have to continue to pay them into next year and they won't be having any income?
Okay, right, sorry. Yes, if you're talking about some of the remaining sectors that are closed, and I agree with you. We want to see as many closed sectors open as possible. I think we've been able to make enormous progress over the last month, reopening retail and then hospitality. And as the Prime Minister said just recently, we're very keen to make more progress on all the other sectors that continue to be closed, and we hope to be able to make progress on all of those very soon.
Okay, talk to me about the scheme that you've come up with for employers to bring back 16 to 24-year-olds. They're going to get a bonus as far as that's concerned. What's stopping them then laying off workers who are 25 plus?
Well, they have to show, in order to qualify for this support, that the jobs are additional, and that will be part of the criteria that's used to assess whether those companies are eligible to access the scheme and get the support. It will be a critical part of it, measuring that additionality, because you're absolutely right. What we want to do is create new jobs, not just displace existing jobs, and that's been a feature of previous schemes like this that have been introduced, and I think that's a sensible feature, and we will look to replicate that for the Kickstart scheme. So
that's not going to happen then? That's what you're saying, that's not going to happen. So an employer won't be bringing back the 16 to 24-year-olds and laying off the 25-year-olds plus. That's just not going to happen as part of this scheme.
Yeah, that will be a criteria of being eligible for the support, is to demonstrate that these jobs are additional, they're new jobs. But fundamentally what this is about is providing opportunity to young people. They're the ones that are most impacted by this crisis. They're 2.5 times as likely to work in a closed sector, and all the economic evidence tells us that young people, if they lose contact with the labour market early in their career, it impacts them for a very long period of time to come, which is why I think we really need to act, and the Kickstart scheme hopefully will ensure that instead of having a generation of young people scarred by coronavirus, we will have this generation of Kickstarters who we've provided a better future for.
Got it. Thanks for explaining that. Talk to me about skilled workers. People in hospitality, it's terrible that they will lose their jobs, but waiters and others, bar staff, potentially not that hard for them to get a new job, some might say. Skilled workers, once those skilled workers' jobs are gone, they're gone, whether they're car workers, whether they're pilots in the aviation industry, whether they're engineers or whatever. Why aren't you doing more to help them? Because those sectors are saying that you're not helping them.
Well, for the reasons that I just outlined, we have unashamedly concentrated our support on the young, because I think that's where there are the most acute issues, the ones that have been most impacted, and the ones where their life chances are most impacted as well by what's happening. But you are right. One thing we did yesterday is introduce a brand new bonus for companies to take on apprentices above the age of 25. That's not something that normally happens. Typically, incentive payments to employers to take on apprenticeships are concentrated on the young, and we did that as well yesterday.
That's not helping the aviation industry right now, is it?
Well, actually, 44% of apprentices today are actually older than 25, and we know that apprenticeships work as a way to provide
skilled workers flying aeroplanes, and they're all being laid off.
Right, but as people transition to new opportunities, Kay, an apprenticeship is a good way to do that, because the point about an apprenticeship is No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to take years at all, actually. And what we're finding is
Do you know how
we've
long it
improved
takes
both
to
the
train to be a
quality
pilot?
of apprenticeships and. But I thought you were asking me about people transitioning out of those jobs and to find new opportunities, and that's what we did today or yesterday.
That's
is to
not what I'm
provide an
asking you,
incentive
Chancellor. I'm
for
asking about you
employers to take
protecting
on
those jobs. I'm asking you about protecting jobs, not transitioning out of them.
I thought you were asking me about skills.
Yeah, and pilots are
older people.
skilled, as are car makers. They'd say they're
Right,
not getting
but
enough support from you.
If you're asking me about different sectors, right, the aviation industry absolutely is one that has been acutely impacted by what's going on, and the transport sector is in constant dialogue with that industry. Obviously, as an industry, they have been able to access all the support schemes that we put in place, whether that's the furlough scheme or indeed actually for these very large companies, the various financing and liquidity and loan guarantee schemes that we put in place. So they have availed themselves of those. And the most important thing we could do, which is what they were asking for, is to enable travel to happen again. And now that we are in a different phase of our tackling of the epidemic, we were able to introduce air travel corridors to allow people to travel safely again. And that's probably the most significant step that we've been able to take there.
Okay. Stamp duty, you are cutting that. It's a recognition that it's a bad tax. It clogs up the housing market. It prevents labour's mobility around the country. Why not just scrap it altogether?
Well, I think in the first instance, our priority is to generate activity in the housing market. I was concerned house prices falling for the first time in 8 years, transactions were down 50%. And because of the changes we made yesterday, almost 90% of people buying a main home in the next several months will pay no stamp duty at all. That's an average saving of £4,500. But what I'm interested in is all the activity that moving generates. The buying, the selling, the moving, the confidence, that generates economic activity. We know that when people move home, they typically spend about 5% of the value of their home on doing it up, on renovations. That's what I want to see. And I'm hopeful that by doing what is quite a significant cut over this time frame, we can catalyse that activity and ultimately protect and create jobs in that sector. And if you put that alongside the Green Homes Grant scheme, where people can apply for vouchers up to £5,000 or 2/3 of the cost to install energy efficiency measures, then those two things put together will mean hopefully we can drive an enormous amount of economic activity around the housing industry, DIY construction, and that will be very good for employment in the short term and benefit regions up and down the UK.
Chancellor, if I could ask, as I said, you didn't answer my question, but we're almost out of time. I want to ask you about the £10 in August scheme. Which restaurants are taking part?
Okay, sorry, it cut out for a minute. I think you're asking me about the restaurant scheme and which restaurants are taking part. The website will go live next week, where restaurants can sign up to be participating. I think a number of restaurant chains last night, I think, were very keen to participate. But any restaurant can participate. They can sign up next week on our website. And then once we get into August, they will be able to claim back the discount from us on a weekly basis, similar to how the furlough scheme operated, which I think most businesses had a very good experience with, and we hopefully can replicate that for this scheme as well.
Okay, you acknowledge, though, that people are not eating out because they're frightened, as opposed to the fact that they can't afford to eat out.
Well, I've seen over the last few weeks, as I'm sure you have and your watchers have, the enormous efforts that restaurants up and down the country have gone to make sure that their premises are safe for us to return to. We'll all notice differences, whether it's ordering on an app, whether it's screens everywhere, a different way of doing things, tables that are spaced out. They've made that effort. They're keen to welcome us back. I want to support them in that effort. And as I said, we have to relearn something that we all took for granted a little while ago. And people should have the confidence to return because of the measures that restaurants have taken. I'm hopeful that this Eat Out to Help Out discount will capture the imagination, and this is all about protecting jobs. There are 2 million people who work in this industry. I think this is important. They're disproportionately younger, women, BME communities and rural and coastal communities reliant on these industries. I really want to do my utmost to try and protect those 2 million jobs, and through this scheme we can all do our bit, play our part and eat out to help out.
OK, Chancellor, I'm out of time, but can I ask you two very, very, very quick questions, literally very quick questions. One of them's about the beauty industry. That is worth £30 billion a year on its own, which is what you've given us as part of this mini budget. When will beauticians be able to go back to work, really quickly?
As I said, the Prime Minister's keen to make progress on this, and he said that hopefully, very soon we'll be able to make announcements on the next stages of our reopening plan.
OK, finally,
But I
£30
agree with
billion,
you, it's
a
an
lot of
important
money.
industry.
OK, £30 billion, a lot of money. 84 million, not so much. That's how much it would cost to allow National Health Service frontline staff to park for free. Are you going to look at that again? Because at the moment, what you're saying is that they will not be able to park for free. These people have risked their lives to save hours. It'll cost you £84 million to allow them to park for free. Surely we should be doing that.
Yeah. Well, Kay, I absolutely join with you in applauding and thanking our frontline NHS staff and care workers. They've done a fantastic job. I think on parking, our position hasn't changed. As far as I'm aware, we have a commitment to provide free parking during this crisis to employees, and that remains the case. But on top of that, we have a manifesto commitment to expand the use of free parking to people who are using the NHS in most need, and we remain committed to those plans.
And so that free parking will continue. That free parking will continue for frontline workers.
I think the position hasn't changed, Kay. I think the Health Secretary announced at the beginning of this crisis for employees that they would have access to discounted or free parking for the duration of the pandemic. But also on top of that, there's a separate manifesto commitment we had to expand free NHS car parking to those who are using the NHS and who are in most need. So nothing has changed in either of those positions.
As a former Prime Minister once said, it's good to talk to you. I know you've got a busy morning ahead. Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it, Chancellor.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.